Hello everyone, welcome to Race Online Classes. In this video, we are going to discuss the current situation, Ukraine crisis. So before entering into the chapter, just we will have a quick look, crux of the topic. What is Ukraine? Okay, what are Ukraine crisis? About NATO, reasons for Russia's interest in Ukraine, Ukraine crisis, what was the background, global concerns with escalation of Ukrainian conflict, effect on world, global impact of Ukrainian crisis, economical impact, and other areas. And finally, the most important clause, concerns for India's due to Ukraine crisis. Right? Let's start the chapter. Now, before getting into the Ukraine crisis, first we have to understand what is NATO. Because the problem with the Ukraine crisis starts with NATO. In order to understand the Ukrainian crisis, first, what is NATO? What was the background? What exactly NATO? Why? What was the reason behind Russia's interest in Ukraine? Okay, all these we will cover in the NATO. First, what exactly is NATO? NATO stands for North Atlantic Treaty Organization, established by the North Atlantic Treaty, also called Washington Treaty of April 1949 by the United States, Canada, and several Western European nations to provide collective security against the Soviet Union. So, here what you have to remember is what is Washington Treaty. This is very important. The main reason behind, the main clause behind this NATO is Washington Treaty. Who are the signatories? United States and other European countries. What was the objective? Collective security. Now, NATO membership is open to any other European state in a position to further the principles of this treaty and to contribute to the security of the North Atlantic area. Article 5, this is very important provision of the NATO agreement or NATO treaty. This article is very important, and this is the main reason behind the current Ukrainian crisis. Article 5, a key provision of the treaty states that if one member of the alliance is attacked in Europe or North America, it is to be considered an attack on all members. This effectively put Western Europe under the nuclear umbrella of the United States. This is a very important provision of the treaty. Now, Ukraine wants to be a member of NATO. Similarly, Russia don't want Ukraine to be a member of NATO. Now, what exactly is the NATO? If any country joins in NATO, it is a collective responsibility. Okay, see the Article 5 provision of the treaty. Okay, North America alliance is attacked in Europe. Alliance is attacked in Europe. It is a collective responsibility, right? This article is very important. Now, Europe and Ukraine wants to join in NATO, whereas Russia is against membership. Why? Let's have a look. No. The most recent member states to be added to the NATO are Montenegro on 5th June 2017, and the most recent one is North Macedonia to 27th March 2020, joined on 27th March 2020. The present strength of NATO is 30 member nations, and headquarters located at Brussels. Don't confuse with Brazil. Brazil is different and Brussels are different. Brussels is the capital of Belgium. See the present members. They are the member countries of NATO. Okay, so last one was North Macedonia, Montenegro. These are the members. So NATO strength is increasing year by year. Now this is the problem to Russia. This is a big problem to Russia. Why? Because Russia is a common enemy to these countries. If Russia attacks any other country, these countries will collectively attack any other nations like Russia. They will target Russia. That is a problem. If Ukraine joins with NATO, now if Russia attacks Ukraine in the near future, not this one, in the near future, these countries will join with Ukraine and they'll attack Russia. That is the problem. That is a problem. That is the reason why Russia don't want Ukraine to be a member of NATO. Now, why? What are the reasons for Russia's interest in the Ukraine? Why Russia is focusing so much in Ukraine? What is there in the Ukraine? Why Russia is focusing? Already we know in 1991, due to the disintegration of USSR, Ukraine was formed. Ukraine got independence twice. One is 1921, and the other time is next time is 1991. Okay, so after the disintegration of the Soviet Union, Ukraine formed as a separate country, independent country. Now, why Russia is showing utmost interest in Ukraine? Let's have a look. Now, NATO support to Ukraine. The biggest problem is NATO support to Ukraine. As we discussed earlier, what happened if NATO supports Ukraine? Already I told you, collective security. So, which don't like by the Russia. Russia don't like. Okay. NATO support to the Ukraine. Russia is not happy with the efforts by the US and European Union to induct Ukraine into the US-led military alliance. US-led military alliance in the sense NATO. US-led military alliance of NATO and keep it out of Russian control. Now Russia is feeling that if Ukraine joins NATO, okay, these countries will take Ukraine far away from Russia, which Russia don't like. Russia domination will not work out in Ukraine. So this is the main reason. Ukraine act as a crucial buffer zone between Russia. See the map of Ukraine? No. Russia views that growing support for Ukraine from NATO in terms of weaponry, training, personal threat to its own security because Ukraine is becoming strong. So if when NATO gives support to Ukraine, automatically Ukraine will become strong. It is a big threat to Russia. In October 2018, Ukraine joined the United States and seven other NATO countries in a series of large-scale air exercises in the Western Ukraine. This is the most important region, Western Ukraine. We will discuss later about this. Okay. So Ukraine also conducted naval exercises and defense exercises with NATO and other European countries. It has also accused Ukraine of boosting its own troop numbers in preparation for an attempt to retake of Donbas region. This Donbas is a collective region. I'll explain in the next slide. Just remember this Donbas region. An allegation Ukraine has denied. So it was just allegation. Ukraine was denied. So what was the allegation that Ukraine is boosting its own troops in the Donbas region? Donbas region is Eastern European region. I'll show you the map here. Next. What are the other important regions? Historical ties. Historical ties means what was the past. So already I told you before 1991, that is before disintegration of Russia, disintegration of USSR, Ukraine was a part of Russia. So they have historical ties, cultural ties. Okay, all these type of ties. For example, in India also there are some states like if you take the example of Nepal and Bihar, what we will say roti beti ka relation we have, right? Similarly, Andhra Karnataka border, where in the border zones you can see the people. I'll show you the map and you will understand this. See, yeah, it's perfect. Now, this is the border area. This side Russia you have, this side European countries you have. This is a buffer zone between Russia and Europe. Now, just see the map. Have a look at here. Now, this is the buffer zone. Buffer zone means here in this region, you can see people of both the cultures, Ukrainians and Russian. Similarly, you can take the example of Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh border, where on the border of Andhra Pradesh, people will speak Tamil. On the border of Karnataka, people will speak Kannada. On the border of Telangana, people will speak Marathi of Maharashtra. Okay, so this is a border zone. Now, coming to Ukraine, entire map, this side of the Ukraine tilted towards Russia means the people of this region are pro-Russia. Okay, the people of this region is pro-European. One of the main cause behind this Ukraine crisis is, apart from NATO, this regionalism. In the political science, in the political theory, what do you call regionalism? Now these people were tilted towards Russia, these people were tilted towards European Union because this is a buffer zone. Now, have you seen the Crimea here? Just have a look. Crimea. I'll explain about this Crimea later. Okay. Just let's back. Now, so see the culture, almost similar, but they have some different attitude, different culture, different appearance, and all. Russia, Ukraine. Now, historical ties. Russia has deep cultural, economic, and political bonds with Ukraine, and in many ways, Ukraine is central to Russia's identity. Nothing wrong in this because Ukraine was a part of Russia. So definitely they'll adopt some parts of its culture. So they are following the same culture, but with slight difference. Slight difference. Okay. Now, Russia's view the growing support for Ukraine and NATO. Excuse me. Yeah. Russian diaspora. This is Russian diaspora. Among Russians, top concern is the welfare of the approximately 8 million ethnic Russians. So in the Ukraine region also, you have Russian ethnic communities, this part. Now Russia is claiming that yes, it is our responsibility to protect these ethnic tribes, ethnic communities, because this party is dominated by Russians. Already I told you this is pro-Russian region. Now, superpower image. This is very, very important. After the Cold War, there was a Cold War between after Second World War. Sorry, after Second World War, during the time of Cold War, there is a completely power clashes between USSR and USA. Right? USA and USSR competitively they increase space race, arms race, everything. Now Russia want to become superpower in the present arena. Now the problem is Russia is losing its superpower because if NATO becomes strong, Russia will lose its identity. That superpower brand image will lose. Okay, so to protect that identity, now superpower image. After the Soviet Union collapse, many Russian politicians viewed the divorce with the Ukraine as a mistake of history and a threat to Russia standing as a great power. If Ukraine also lost, there is a big problem for Russia. Losing a permanent hold on the Ukraine and letting it fall into the Western orbit was seen by the many as a major blow to Russia's international image. Prestige. Sorry. Now, background. What was the crisis? What was the background? Okay, what was the background of this present crisis? He was a former president. In 2003, Ukraine's then president Viktor Yanukovych decided against the signing of an association agreement (AA) with the European Union, sparking major European protests in the pro-European protests in the Ukraine. In February 2014, the Ukrainian parliament voted impeach to Yanukovych, who fled Kiev. Kiev is the capital of Ukraine. Okay. Now, this was a treaty association agreement of the European Union. So people pro-European protest in Ukraine. Okay, so people of Ukraine want to sign the treaty, pro-European protest, and what you have seen in the news, popularly called as Maidan, Euro Maidan, what is in the capital center, that is because of this treaty. It was named after the treaty. Subsequently, in March 2014, Russia annexed Crimea, an autonomous region, an autonomous peninsula. This part, an autonomous peninsula. See, here you have an autonomous peninsula in southern Ukraine with strong Russian loyalties on the pretext that it was defending its interests and those of Russian speaking citizens. Now, already in 2014, in the same pretext, Russia annexed Crimea, the Crimean Peninsula, this part. Now it's a part of Russia, and they conducted referendum. People voted in favor of Russia. So now it's a part of Russia. Similarly, shortly afterwards, pro-Russian separatists in the Ukraine, Donetsk and Luhansk. This is very important. Yeah, these two regions, Donetsk and Luhansk, collectively called Donbass region. In the previous slides, we have gone through Donbass region. This is the Donbass region, collectively called Donbass region. See these regions. Okay. Eastern side of the Ukraine, they are favorable to Russia. They are pro-Russia regions. Regions declared their independence from the Kiev, prompting months of heavy fighting. Now, they declared themselves from the Kiev, that is capital of Russia. Okay, they declared independence. They are pro-Russia. The European Union, the United States, and other countries imposes sanctions on Russia. The European Union, Ukraine, AA entered into the force in September 2014. Now we have to understand the word sanction. The term sanction we are seeing news in regularly. So sanctions are nothing but exports and restrictions on exports and imports. In short, restrictions on exports and imports. Now they are cutting off. Okay, so recently we have seen Germany also impose sanctions. US also impose sanctions. Some countries are imposing sanctions against Russia. So they started this one. Sanctions in the sense restrictions on trade or import or export, whatever you can say. So better you can remember sanctions means restrictions on imports and exports. Now, in 2014, a peace plan for Eastern Ukraine was Minsk Protocol. Minsk was a city in Belarus, Ukraine. The Minsk Protocol 1 was signed. However, the agreement quickly broke down because it's not a worthy agreement. Agreement is very good, but failed to implement. So, what are the provisions of this Minsk Protocol which was failed to implement? What are the provisions? See, provisions include prisoner exchanges. Prisoner exchanges means during wartime we will arrest the prisoners and we have to release them as a part of human rights. We will release the prisoners. Deliveries of humanitarian aid like human relief, assistance, and all. Withdrawal of heavy weapons, could be nuclear or could be fully armed tanks, etc. All this comes under this category. As fighting continued in 2015, representatives of Russia, Ukraine, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and the leaders of two pro-Russian separatist regions, what we have seen, Donbass, a 13-point agreement in February 2015 in Minsk, same, okay. The leaders from France, Germany, and other European countries, Normandy 4, okay, only these four countries, France, Germany, Ukraine, and Russia, the Normandy 4, agreed to new ceasefire and a package of measures for the implementation of the Minsk agreement. So totally there were two Minsk agreement. Okay, already I told you Minsk was the city of Belarus. You can say capital city. Right. The agreement includes provisions for the ceasefire, withdrawals of heavy weaponry, same, which were failed to implement again. Okay. However, I told you, efforts to reach a diplomatic settlement and satisfactory resolution have been unsuccessful. Means they failed to follow both the agreements. So finally, both the agreements were failure. Now, what are the global concerns? If Ukraine and Russia involve into war, what are the global crises we have to see? In the globalized world, we know already if COVID is attacked in one country, even we are affecting. Suppose if COVID started in China, as we know, COVID started in China, and finally we got the COVID. Right? In the similar way, in the globalized world, if two countries are involved in wars, what will be their impact on the other countries? Okay, that what you call global impact. So already know first, in order to understand global impact, first you have to understand the economy of both the countries, right? So coming to Russia, the most important exports from Russia are crude oil. crude oil, and next defense exports. Coming to Ukraine, the most important exports, leave about imports, what they will get, that is different story. What they will send, that is important first. Okay. Coming to the Ukraine is completely agriculture economy. Okay. Sorry, what we can say, in world, it is a fifth largest exporter of the wheat. Apart from that, they have sunflower and other areas, okay, agriculture related. So these two countries have a good share in the exports, and these two countries contribute less than 2% gdp to the country. See, 2% of the world's gdp is not a small amount. Russia and Ukraine together constitute about approximately 2% of the global gdp. Now let's understand what was the impact, what will be the impact. So first, deteriorating relations with the USA. The conflict in Ukraine risks further deterioration of the US-Russia relations, because already after Second World War, we have already gone through it. During Cold War era, their relations are totally decreasing, totally, completely vain. They are not happy. Similarly, if the country started arms race, they also start arms race. Okay, weapons race, nuclear. So already the relations are, so now these relations are becoming bitter day to day, day by day, becoming bitter. US-Russia relations and greater escalation if Russia expands its presence in Ukraine or into NATO countries, right? So the relation is totally disturbing. Shift NATO focus to Europe again. The problem. This is one of the important. So what happened during Trump? NATO and other countries totally focused their target towards China, because China was a common enemy for these countries in terms of economy, in terms of other relations, and most importantly, that LOC, Asia Pacific region. Okay, due to all these reasons, okay, China and USA have some kind of issues, and they're ready to face over. But unfortunately, nothing happened. Okay, fortunately, nothing happened. Now the thing is, NATO focus shifted towards Europe. Europe in the sense Ukraine, and Ukraine, Russia, because this Russia-Ukrainian crisis shifted the focus from China to Russia. Shift NATO focus to Europe again. An escalating crisis in Ukraine threatens to upend recent efforts by the United States and NATO to shift the alliance's attention. Previously, it was towards China. Now it is towards Russia. Alliance attention to the security challenge posed by the China, and would push it back towards its traditional role of protecting Europe and by extension North America. So previously, before when everything settled down, now NATO's focus previously, NATO's focus was towards China. Now, NATO's focus again shifted to Europe. Imposed sanctions. So, sanctions already I told you, kind of exports and imports cut off, or any other transactions, commercial projects, whatever. It's a kind of restriction you can assume. Restrictions. Now, the West imposed sanctions on Russia after the seizure of Crimea, and could add painful new measures such as preventing it from pumping Russian gas through newly built Nord Stream pipeline in Germany. See, this is a Nord Stream pipeline pumping the gas. Okay, gas pipeline. Nord Stream 2 is one of the two pipelines that Russia has laid underwater in the Baltic Sea, and in addition to its traditional land-based pipeline network that runs through Eastern Europe, including Ukraine. It's a very commercial project. Energy crisis. So energy crisis, already in the previous slides we discussed, Russia is the chief exporter of crude oil, energy. Now, see, in any conflict, Europe worries Russia will turn down gas and oil supplies, driving energy prices up. If energy prices up, it leads to inflation. Now, what was their worry here? What is their worry here? If Russia increases oil prices, or due to war it cut off crude oil, what will be the situation? Okay, there is a heavy demand for crude oil. Remember, in economy, crude oil is very important. The rise in crude oil price leads to inflation, because energy is very important. It will cost in everything, right from transportation to right to your retail goods, everything. If petroleum prices increases or diesel prices, simply crude oil price increases, it will impact global economy. Now, peace. The conflict has heightened tensions in Russia's relation with both the United States and Europe, complicating the prospectus for cooperation elsewhere, including on issues of terrorism, arms control, and political solution in Syria. Now, the present situation has increasing the tensions in Russia's relations with both the United States and Europe. Now, these three superpowers are European Union, collectively we can say, these three superpowers are involved in wars or war-like situations. Definitely, it will create a tension in the global platform. Global impact of Ukrainian crisis. Russia and Ukraine together account for less than 2% of global GDP. We discussed already this point. Russia is the world's third biggest producer of petroleum and is a major exporter of natural gas. Right now, during this war time, it will stop its imports. When it starts its imports, it will affect on global economy. It leads to inflation also. Right, Russia's attack could slow Europe's economic recovery by sending already elevated energy prices even higher, ever higher. Europe, an energy importer. Europe, an energy importer means European zone is a, or European Union is a importer of crude oil. Europe, an energy importer, receives close to 40% of its natural gas from Russia. Now, see, if these countries support Ukraine, definitely they'll stop this one. Okay, again, it leads to energy crisis. Now, Ukraine farms feeds millions of people around the world. See what we discussed in the previous slides. Russia's chief export areas are crude oil, and Ukraine's is totally agriculture economy. Totally, in this one, like India, you can assume. Okay, majority of the people are engaging in agriculture, and contribution is somewhat better. So, agriculture economy now their exports will come down. The threat to farms in the eastern Ukraine and exports through Black Sea ports could reduce wheat supplies at a time when global food prices are at their highest level ever since 2011, and some countries are suffering from food shortages. Ukraine is the world's fifth largest exporter of the wheat. Okay. No. Rising energy and food prices will intensify the inflationary pressures. Inflationary, already I told you, crude oil is the basic component in the economy. If the price of the crude oil increases, automatically other goods also will increase because the chief commodity, basic commodity, right? Inflationary pressures that policymakers and central banks are struggling to ease. If inflation increases, what will happen? RBI has to change its monetary policies, and similarly, it will affect on regular impact. Okay, already inflation in India is somewhere between 5 to 5.5. With this impact, okay, inflation will rise further more. In the United States, the world's largest economy, consumer inflation jumped to 7.5 last month compared to 12 months earlier. The steepest annual increase. Already effect started in the Western countries, especially in the America. What happened? Inflation 7.5%, which is too high. The pandemic has left the global economy with two key points of vulnerability: high inflation and jittery financial markets. After shocks from the invasion, you could easily worsen both. So already due to the pandemic, due to COVID-19, already world economy already suffering. After that, immediately Ukraine crisis or the war between Ukraine and Russia impact further more. It's break down to the economy. See, have a quick look. Impact on India. First, you have to understand what are the agriculture exports from Ukraine. Now, what are the agriculture exports? Means what Ukraine sends to us. See, corn, sunflower oil, India imports oil, this one, wheat, oil cake, soya bean, poultry meat. See this one. Now, all these exports impact, we are not able to get any of these products. Okay, apart from this, already we have to pay these petroleum crude oil bills or gold or whatever be the import bills in terms of dollars, right? Imagine if crude oil prices increases 10 rupees or 10%. Imagine, suppose this month we paid 100 rupees import bill for crude oil or petroleum. So if they increase the prices, again our import bill also increase. So increase in these oil prices increase our import bill, means we need more dollars to make the payments. Okay, so this war also impacts rupee dollar conversion, rupee dollar value also it affects. Okay, so these are the exports from Ukraine. See, India imports 10% of the sunflower oil from Ukraine region. Okay, these are the other exports. Now, a 10% increase in the crude oil prices will increase India's current account deficit by $15 billion. $15 billion. Rise in edible oil prices as Ukraine alone accounts for 70% of India's sunflower oil imports. See, oil imports. Chief exporter of sunflower oil. Economic sanctions will impact India's defense imports as Russia is India's biggest arms supplier. This is a very, very, very important point for us. Economic sanctions will impact India's defense imports because Russia is the chief defense exporter of India. We are getting BrahMos from Russia, S-400 from Russia. All these we are getting from Russia. Apart from these, some submarines are there, some aircraft carrier previously we have, and apart from that, we have helicopters and small vessels. We have coastal guards. We have, okay. All these we used to export. We used to import from Russia. Now, concerns for India due to Ukraine crisis. Like, what are the problems India has to face? First point, to maintain balance between Russia and US, because India is a friend to both the countries. We are maintaining good relations between India, US and Russia. Now, at this time we have to balance that relationship. We should not leave US, we should not leave Russia, because both are very important. Say for example, US is absorbing our people, our unemployment, they're providing employment to our people, and we have good export and import transactions with US, and these are top five exporter. Okay, US is the top five exporter for India, like they are exporting goods to us. Similarly, similarly Russia is a chief defense exporter to India. They are exporting defense goods and all these things to India. Now we have to maintain that healthy relationship between both the countries. That is the reason why government of India is maintaining neutrality. Government of India is neutral in this crisis. They are neither supporting Russia nor supporting US or NATO or Ukraine. Okay, because we have to maintain balance between both these superpowers, because both these countries are very very important. During After Second World War, during Cold War time also, India didn't support both the countries. What we have done, instead of supporting USSR or USA, we formed third bloc, popularly known as non-aligned movement or non-alignment movement. We are on the third path. So India, right from the beginning, our philosophy is to promote peace. That is a directive principles of state policy under Article 51A of the Constitution. So we have to maintain that peace relationship with the other countries. We should not involve in war with any other country. Okay, so that is the main important reason. So we have to maintain balance between both the superpowers. Next, India has good relations with both Russia and the United States, and siding with one of these countries could cost India's relationship with other. However, India has maintained its neutrality from distant conflict in the Eastern Europe. Yes. Okay. So we are maintaining somewhat distance with the Europe. I already told you, right? So this promotion of peace is very, very important part of DPSP. So directive principles of state policy, we have to promote peace. We should not wage a war against any other country. Okay. Now, India's position on the ongoing Ukraine crisis undergraded by the desire to keep clear of the crosshairs of big power rivalry in reminiscent of its quintessential strategic autonomy. S-400. This is very, very important. This is to target aerial attacks on Indian subcontinent. These are the S-400. Okay, so this main target is to destroy aerial targets. Okay, we imported these from Russia, which is very very important. Now already these some of the orders have been pending, okay, yet to deliver. So government of India don't want to take any kind of risk with reference to these things. See, the crisis comes precisely as India's purchase of the Russian S-400 missile system is underway, not yet delivered, underway, and India hopes for a waiver of the US sanctions on this. Conflict will complicate both the delivery of the system and the possibility of a presidential, brings Russia and China closer. Now, this both the communist governments are bringing closer. This Ukrainian crisis, they already, China has made the positive statements towards Ukraine. That is, China is supporting Russia already because of their communist ideology. So, bringing again these two superpowers closer. Okay, right. Now, India's investment in Russia. India plans in Russia's energy sector and in the development of Far East in general would become problematic, especially by the reluctance of the private sector to fall of the complex US sanctions. The new sanctions could exclude Russia from the SWIFT payment system. So already this happened last night. Okay, sorry, last before night. SWIFT payment system, already they excluded Russia from this system. Okay, so here apart from these things, we have to remember one more thing. Why democratic countries are not supporting the war, like European nations or US or India? They are not supporting the war directly, because you have to remember one thing. In the democratic countries, the leaders are answerable to the people, right? Suppose if anything went wrong with the war, economy will collapse. So while elections, they are answerable to their citizens. So in that way, coming to this Russia, North Korea, or any communist countries, mostly they are not answerable to their people, because they need not to go for the elections in the first instance, even though already Putin will be the president for the next decade. Okay, so the communist setup was strong. So that is the reason why democratic countries will not take a quick stand over war, because war causes damage to both the sides. Even though one country may win, one may not win, war leads to a complete damage to the country's economy, and at the same time human loss, food prices, that is inflation. So due to these reasons, democratic leaders may not take quick stand on the wars. So this is all about the Ukrainian crisis, and very soon we'll come out with a new video. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.